Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our Women's Day celebration and to the opening of the third iteration of Liewe Land. A special welcome to all the children who joined us today. It is so nice to see so many kids here at the Art Centre. First, I would like to thank everyone that was involved in today's event. The gallery staff, Titus, Pungani and Sadie, you are rock stars. I couldn't do it without you. Thank you so much for all your hard work and your dedication. Dieneke, it was an absolute honor to work with you on Liewe Land. I hope we can do so again in the future. We've already had some murmurings about a possible collaboration for the future, which I'm very excited about. Thank you also to all the other departments that made today happen. It is lovely to have such an amazing team that we know we can count on always. I would like to introduce to you Dieneke Orton. Dieneke is a curator and researcher based in Johannesburg, and she has been actively involved in the South African art world for over 10 years. Currently, she is the visual arts curator for both the Klein Karoo Nasionale Kunstefees, KAK&K, and the Art Club Arts Festival. She held the position of gallery manager for the contemporary art gallery Lismore & Associates for 6 years. She received a number of curatorial awards, such as 2K Knet Vesta Awards for Best Achievement in Visual Arts, the Fulcrum Suzanne Shaw Creative Award for Young Curators, and the Joint BASA Award for the South African Taxi Foundation Art Award. She recently completed her doctorate, which examined strategies for curating difficult knowledge under the ambit of the Saatchi Research Chair in South African Arts and Visual Culture at the University of Johannesburg. Welcome, Dieneke Orton.
Good day, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. It's lovely to see you all on this wonderful day, and a warm welcome also to all the artists who could make it today. I also want to reiterate what Rika said about the thank you to the gallery staff. They are really a wonderful team to work with, and everyone from UJ Art and Culture who has put this today together and has made this a possibility. It's really wonderful to see such a big team work so seamlessly and wonderfully together. So more about the exhibition. This exhibition started 2 years ago when I discovered a number of prints from so-called old master paintings at the Voortrekker Monument in Pretoria. I then asked a number of artists to respond to and use these artworks, these prints, as a way to give their own opinion about what they saw in the artworks and about the landscape. And they could use this in any way they saw fit. They could use it as a material, as inspiration. And they've done a remarkable, interesting things. So they've used it as a way to cut up and compare artworks. There are just so many different things. If you walk into the exhibition space, you'll see I've been amazed and inspired by them every day, especially while we've been installing. It's really incredible to see. The title Liewe Land is an Afrikaans saying which could mean beloved land and oh my goodness. So this duality for me is quite interesting, especially considering the number of conversations we might have about land in South Africa. So what you'll see when you walk into the exhibition is each of the clean prints, framed as if it is the original artwork. So this would be in an old frame. And then we also have a number actually a few of old master paintings from the UJ Art Collection, which is quite wonderful. But instead of only focusing on these artworks, on these early 20th century landscape paintings and what they want to tell us about the landscape in South Africa, we also have contemporary artists who have their own opinions, their own ideas, their own experiences about land, and they have come and brought their own ideas into fruition, and they've shown us what we can think, how we can think of these artworks and of this conversation. And it really is quite inspiring to see. But in another development, we also have a lot of the prints left. You'll see there's an art station at the back. And what we now ask is that everyone here today also make their own mark and leave their own, be part of the conversation so that you also have a say in the way that we think about these artworks today. So instead of only thinking about what they were meant in the time that they were created, we now think about what they mean to us today. So I really hope you will take the opportunity, because I think it's wonderful for each and everyone to have a say in this conversation. Thank you.
Our speaker today is Stephen Hobbs. Stephen Hobbs is no stranger to us. He's an old friend of the gallery as an exhibiting artist, curator, and he also served on the gallery's accession committee. For the past 3 decades, Hobbs's practice had been underpinned by 3 core interest areas: architecture and the built environment, art and war, and anatomy and the body. Johannesburg, his hometown, has served as a critical reference point for his artistic insights into the apartheid city turned African city, with a particular interest in the impact of defensive urban planning and architecture on the behavioral aspects of city and society. Printmaking, model making, video and photography serve as foundations for large-scale installations and commissions, simultaneously offering audiences access to a variety of editioned and serialized works. Much of this effort has been facilitated through a close collaboration with David Krupp projects in South Africa and New York. Hobbs is a fellow of the Ampersand Foundation, co-director of the Trinity Session, and visiting critic at the Graduate School of Architecture, Johannesburg. Let's welcome Stephen Hobbs.
So I suppose to all the women in the audience, all the years that precede today and all the years that follow from today, I wish you a happy Women's Day. Thank you for having me here. Thank you for inviting me. The initial brief to me, and to inform the words I have to share today, was around art and technology. And that might seem a little bit strange in the context of the works for those of you who have already started to familiarize yourself with them, because the extent to which we see the influence of technology in some of these works is either distant or close. And I'm going to reflect on a couple of works that have a direct dialogue with technological systems, if you will, online and augmentation and so forth, and see how we can unpack the meaning of this exhibition through those works. But first, I'd like to start with the origin or the source for the exhibition, the architecture that housed these prints in the first place. So the Voortrekker Monument, for me, in the context of my interests around defensive architecture and the kind of militarization of the landscape, is probably one of our most iconic features in the country, let alone the Castle of Good Hope in Cape Town. Its dominance of the landscape, and perhaps paralleled in these modernist prints that one could acquire in the early days, seem to correlate well with one another, in the sense that the panopticon view that the Voortrekker Monument offers, surveying that land, is as much about a celebration of the land as it is about a tactical view on land ownership, about domination of land, about line of sight, about inclusion and exclusion, about identifying enemies, and about including family and folk. So for me, in a way, the Voortrekker Monument is a marvel of a kind of war machine, in a way. And for those of us who don't know, its architectural source is rooted in Nazi architecture. So there's a number of sensitive touch points there for some people, and of course a fascinating terrain to imagine a deconstruction of that kind of ideological position. But if you think of the building as a piece of technology in and of its own right, and for those of you who have literally ever witnessed the light pouring in from the oculus in the dome of the Voortrekker Monument, landing on the vow of the covenant on the 16th of December, on the years where it's not a cloudy day, that in and of itself is a profound expression of the building's power and form to harness an ideological position. So I'm fascinated with those kinds of things, let alone the fact that some of those carved friezes, if not all of them, from a technological point of view, were carved by artisans in Europe and then brought to South Africa. So that says something about the analog technologies that were perhaps not available at the time in South Africa and needed to be imported. And we continue to see that today. It's cheaper to import than it is necessarily to work with local materials. So there's some stuff in there that I find interesting. To your accomplishment, I was not aware of the fact that the first iteration of the show was at the Voortrekker Monument in and of itself, and I imagine that ruffled a few feathers at the time. Bravo. Then the manifestation at the Kaka and Car Festival in 2022. Oh, and also to pull that off in 2021 is no mean feat. That was a scary time for all of us. We didn't know whether we should connect or disassociate. And if anything, I think this exhibition is about that conundrum, connecting and disassociating. So scary times to do work, viral times. Okay, Kaka and Car I've been to once or twice, but I don't know what it looked like in that context. And in this context here, I think the exhibition, which I've only seen for the first time today, is provocative and stunning, and just a kind of sensory overload in a way, if one thinks of the source print and the myriad ways in which the artists invited to respond to the works have dealt with them in their own right. So now, to a kind of overarching title for this spiel I'm going to give you today. Speak to staff to acquire land. I'm citing Michelle Rostone's artwork, which you'll familiarize yourselves with in due course if you haven't already. A beautiful little case with one of the prints inside it, marked out and territorialized for acquisition. I believe we can all buy a small piece of that print if we pay attention and ask the staff accordingly. So I suppose why it's important to start with that work is because it's about the gridding. It's about how a grid, be it in mathematical terms, be it in the orchestration of noughts and ones, the binary coding system, is a way in which we kind of splice our landscape and create multiple realities. So I think if I jump to the work of Jaco van Schalkwyk, who is deliberately working with an original piece of work that via the QR code encourages a particular way of seeing and reading. Now he has prompts, he has his own ideas about what he sees in his works, and those are ushered forth in the way that you navigate the online application. You give your insight, and he feeds back to you. So I think that that's really an interesting way of helping some of us to read images, and that's useful. I think many of us, I don't know, many people in the audience, but I think it wouldn't be unfair to say that we often get a kind of stage fright when confronted around talking about what we see, what we think the art means, and so forth. So I think when augmentation, which is what the QR code really represents in terms of mixed reality media, here's a thing, you click on that, it takes you to a website, and suddenly you now have another piece of information relating to the surface of the thing that you're looking at, is a wonderful kind of way of creating dynamics between a static thing and something that appears to be a little bit more interactive and participatory. Henrietta Schultz's use of the QR code is amazing. There is an actual, genuine piece of, I suppose, augmentation, in the sense that the framed canvas or print that we see in front of us seems exposed and raw. But once you access the layer or video layer that is prompted by the QR code, you start to understand that there's a population of the landscape and an imaging and an erasing of bodies. And the video loop takes you through that experience. So what we see initially is passive, but essentially coded through the QR code experience. And then I kind of, by way of a near ending, Phumlani Ntuli's work I find to be, in some ways, probably the most moving, but also captivating from the point of view that it holds a lot of ideas that I think a lot of the other artists on this exhibition are grappling with in terms of superimposition of their own ideologies or of ideologies that were imposed upon them, be it faith, be it about identity, be it about ownership, and so forth. And what's really special about the work for me, I find, is that there's this beautiful tension between a crude animation technique, and I mean that respectfully, that the first character that we see has this kind of clumsy, crude, irritable, scratchy quality, and as they approach the video insertion into the print artwork, there's a reflection on colonial cultural assets through the Johannesburg Art Gallery. I'm giving away too much. You really do need to look at the work itself. Now the work is titled Cloud Migration, and how the video ends is we see an indigenous figure, and throughout the video there are indigenous characters populating or repopulating or re-owning the landscape, or perhaps existing there way before those landscapes were ever painted in the first place. But in the spirit of the cloud migration, which has two ideas for me, is we see this character ascending into the clouds of the landscape. And so the video ends there. Now that's quite an exquisite moment of, I suppose, the meaning of ascension in a particular way, plotting the body through the landscape into a freer space, a space of perspective, to look back onto the land, maybe to reverse the politics of the Voortrekker monument, just to take it back or to be present in it. But the work is titled Cloud Migration. And for those of us who are familiar with our Google Drives or the iCloud system, that can be well, for those of us who are familiar with it, can be terrifying or not terrifying. For those of us who aren't familiar, it's probably because we're outright terrified. But the idea of cloud migration is about moving data. So perhaps from one source, a hard drive, into a server system which sits virtually, but is actually located possibly in Silicon Valley or somewhere in India or in China. No, not China, but certainly India and certainly Silicon Valley. So that idea of migrating information, maybe migrating politics into the cloud and then positing new positions from there, I find intriguing. The work was beautiful to watch. I would suggest, given the crowds today, that you approach it and try and listen to the sound quite carefully, because I think the audio is important in that work. Finally, in my years of putting exhibitions together, I see Gordon Froud is somewhere here in the audience. He will attest to this as much as many other curators who are standing here. Putting together a group exhibition from an audience attendance point of view, let alone all the other resonances that come with that, is a no-brainer. It always means you've got to pull a crowd. But in this instance, I think it's quite unique. Obviously, we're celebrating on National Women's Day. And that also means something about family and friends as well, one would think. And in this context, I think if one considers the young members in the audience, all the way to the more senior, I think there's something for everybody in this exhibition. There's a particular way in which each of the artists have kind of hacked the modernist landscapes that are presented to them. And they've done that in myriad ways. They've either done that in their painterly stylistic form, they've done it in conceptual ways, they've done it through quotation, they've done it through completely repurposing and re-imaging the works, through cartographical insights into the landscape, and so forth. So I found it really fabulous to just walk around and immerse myself in each and every one of those works. Congratulations to all of the artists on the exhibition. Thank you for inviting me, and I hope you all have a fantastic morning. Thank you.